Memory doesn't disappear. Memory decomposes. It ferments in the dark, stains the walls, grows strange new life out of the rot. Silent Hill has always been a place where the interior becomes exterior. Guilt, shame, unspoken violence given body and teeth. In older entries, that translation was often blunt. Suppressed guilt gave you a monster, betrayal became a geography. Silent Hill F keeps that lineage, but it changes the chemistry. Where the earlier games make memory into architecture, F makes memory into biology. The town isn't simply reminding its people of things they've done, it's sprouting those things back to life. Ebisugaoka reads like a museum of forgetting. The mossed stones, the torii gates, the old Inari statues, they feel less like relics and more like bandages wrapped around something that should never have been left alone. The town's history, water dragons, divine trees, sacred swords, the slow accretion of ritual, moves through the game like geological time. Each religion, each myth is a layer of sediment pressed over older blood. They don't replace the past so much as preserve it, embalmed beneath new words and new rites. Hinako Shimizu is the human center of that sediment. She's small in the game's publicity blurbs, a girl on the edge of adulthood. But narrative weight in F is not about age. It's about possession, of roles, of names, of expectation. She's presented to us as a young woman who runs track, who prefers the company of boys, who refuses the neat categories arranged for her. That defiance is also a wound in a town that defines itself through repetition. If Ebisugaoka demands continuity, Hinako is an interruption. That tension between sediment and interruption is how the game makes its first and most important point. Horror is not surprise. It is recognition. The terror feels familiar because it is. The monster you face is built out of the same materials that raised you. The flowers that blossom through Hinako are not some random horror motif. They are memory made plant. They are what happens when histories that were supposed to stay buried insist on growing again. The game's opening sequence makes this literal. You step into a town that seems still, and you quickly learn why stillness is not the opposite of decay. It is its accomplice. The fog is not just atmosphere, it's a filter, a compression of time. Old stories reoccur. Older power structures reassert themselves, and Hinako, who wants only to be herself, begins to feel the slow pressure of everything that was planned for her body. There's an early image I can't shake. Hinako's reaching into a case of preserved flowers, the petals dried and flattened, labeled like specimens. That visual could have been decorative, but it's not. It's a thesis. Memory here is not neutral. It's curated, classified, exhibited. The town has turned pain into artifact, and thus made it manageable. But artifacts can be resurrected, and when those flowers wake, they bloom like accusation. This is the register F sits in. It's not just a horror about monsters in the night, it's a horror about being read, about a community that knows you better than you know yourself, and about the slow, inevitable reappearance of what you tried to leave behind. The blooms are both indictment and elegy. There's a particular cruelty to tradition that F understands. It's not always violent in caricature. Sometimes it is paperwork, polite smiles, recipes for tea, the daily folding of a life into acceptability. But the effect is the same. Identity narrows until there is no margin left to surprise. Hinako resists. She runs, she fights, she speaks too loud. Those are small rebellions that in her world carry outsized consequences. Her father, an alcoholic who keeps the family afloat with shame and petty schemes, is not a cartoon villain. He's a man stuck in the world's only available script for masculinity in his station. Borrower, debtor, angry protector. Her mother is not defeated for dramatic effect. She's the corporeal form of a culture that taught women to make themselves small to survival. Her sister Junko, the golden daughter, is the other side of the coin. Obedient, marrying young, filling the social role without complaint. All of them, in different registers, are invested in a system that trades freedom for stability. If there is a single thematic spine to F, it is this: the ways small violence accumulate into a system that pretends to guard people at the cost of giving them away. Hinako's identity splinters in the house scenes because the game wants you to feel how many hands shape a life. The confrontation scene in the Shimizu home are not spectacles so much as compression. A childhood reduced to an argument about values. A father's debt negotiated in a brief exchange. A sister's distance that is more omission than cruelty. The thrust of the family beats is not "he was abusive." It's "this is the logic that made abuse bearable." That's more devastating. It makes it systemic. That's why the bride imagery hits so hard. Marriage in F is less a romantic contract than a ritual of erasure. The Tsuneki clan's bride price, the symbolic threads, the consecrations, these are narrative devices, but they are also cultural metaphors. The wedding is not transferal of love, it's the transfer of identity. Shimizu Hinako stops being herself and becomes a named object in another family ledger. F literalizes the fear, marriage as annihilation. The monster bridal images, the shiromoku, the peeled face, the spectral bride, are horrific, not because they are grotesque, but because they are plausible representations of losing a self beneath the role. Yet, the game complicates the moral map. Hinako is not a clean hero. She's not a victim who waits for rescue. She's messy, both inside and outside the monster imagery. Sometimes she kills, sometimes her hands are stained in ways that suggest agency, not only domination. The lore of the game, pills, ritual, gods, refuses a single reading. Each ending gives a different moral calculus: drugs that destabilize, gods that possess, love that misfires, and agency that is never pure or simple. That ambiguity is deliberate. The game refuses comfort. The moral economy of F scrubs the easy resolutions. If there's an image to sum up this section, it's the naginata, a long pole arm Hinako wields in the dark shrine. It's an instrument of ceremony and violence, a weapon and a cultural artifact. That doubleness is the tone of Hinako. She is both burden and defiance, tool and person. The weapon is hers to use, but it arrives wrapped in someone else's mythology. This is the part of Silent Hill F that reads like a social critique, not because the game lectures at you. F is too cool for a sermon, but because it observes the machinery of obligation from within the bone. The game asks, what happens when the only paths available are the ones that you require to dissolve yourself? And more disturbingly, is dissolution ever really a choice when everything you've known trains you toward it? Ebisugaoka is the game's third protagonist, not a background, but a living ledger of a cause and consequence. The town's myths, the water dragon that becomes a poisonous undercurrent, the divine cedar struck by lightning, the Tsukomagami fate that venerates old tools aren't atmospheric flex, they're the town's fossil record. Listen to the notes scattered in the town, the physician's log, the maid's letters, the shrine encryptions. They're not simply color, they are the game's chorus, and reading them changes how you interpret every scene. One note will tell of a famine, another will speak of a robe of sacrifices, another will hint at sacred swords hunted memory. Together, they render Ebisugaoka not as an uncanny village, but as a place with an accumulation of policy choices and rituals that result in human collateral. This long view history reframes the supernatural as institutional. Gods don't simply appear out of nowhere, they are woven into governance. The Tsuneki clan's obligation to offer tribute every 8 years sounds like a ritual horror, and it is, but it's also bureaucracy. Laws and customs can be monstrous when institutionalized. The sacred sword animosity, the fox's marriage request, the Tsukomogami's rage, all of it is rooted in decisions made by families, by elites, by people who choose continuity over critique. This is why the Dark Shrine exists as a central set piece. It is both otherworld and archive. an immaculate eerie temple in which earlier lives and earlier sacrifices are catalogued. The shrine feels pristine in a way the town does not. It's as if all the messy human choices were neatly arranged and turned into a cult. The shrine collects names. Mayumi's, other stones, are scratched with apologies and last words. The shrine is less an engine of power and more the place where the town's memories is stored, neat, enforceable, and lethal. The sacredness of the shrine is a political move. By turning pain into ritual, the town made it governable. The awful domestications you see, the way women are told they are good girls, the way men are taught to drink after shame, become codified. Sacredness becomes policy. Policy becomes violence. That is a modern theme masquerading as folklore. Ebisugaoka's fates are not pure opposites. The Inari foxes, the Tsuko Mogami, the divine tree, all have been stitched into each other's across centuries. The syncretism is historically accurate and narratively important. When religions meld, so do their justifications. What starts as a protective myth can harden into a mandate. The curse in F is not a single spirit, but an ongoing social project. How a town chooses to manage trauma. In that sense, the playable word is a critique of the ways communities solve natural and social calamities with rituals that require human sacrifice, literal or symbolic. This is the moral weight F carries. It's not just a horror about monsters, it's horror about inheritance. The town keeps remembering in a narrow way, insisting that the only way forward is to repeat the old scripts. It preserves the past by locking it in place. When we move through Ebisugaoka, we are not exploring a set of haunted houses. We are walking through curated memory, and that makes the town itself moral furniture. Silent Hill F weaponizes beauty. This is maybe its most audacious move. Most horror uses ugliness as a boundary marker. Disfigurement, the uncanny, the grotesque. F says, what if horror seduced you first? What if the most dangerous thing wore petals? The flowers in the games are not ornament. In the earliest notes, you find references to the red spider lily, the flower of the other shore in Japanese tradition. It's associated with death, with final goodbyes, and with the border between worlds. The motif isn't a local flourish. It's the game's syntactic unit. Blooms proliferate on bodies, bloom from wounds, erupt from the soil. They are both beautiful and abject. That doubleness is a thematic engine. Horror in F doesn't come with a single source of revulsion. It comes with a mixture of admiration and dread. You may find a monster stage set piece visually gorgeous, its movement balletic, its forms floral, and then the same form rips a friend. This juxtaposition keeps you from easy moral distance. You cannot simply look away and declare, that is monstrous. The beauty forces attention, which in turn collapses the possibility of moral detachment. There's a deeper game in the way F uses the aesthetic of ritual and the physical language of the body. The bride figure, the doll creatures, and the clustered female forms with kitchen knives, these are all refract around a central anxiety about women's bodies being used as vessels for history. The kitchen knife is a loaded symbol. Home, labor, defense. The dolls are objects taught to be obedient. The faceless women are not only victims, they are the product of being seen only as a utility. The monster design in F reads like a social catalog. These are not generic scare beasts. Each visual choice reflects a way Hinako and the game understands the female experience in that time and place. The sanity system which you manage in-game ties into this metaphor. You can intentionally burn sanity for stronger attacks. The game decouples clarity from power, using your own fragility as a weapon. That mechanic is thematically resonant. Sacrifice parts of your mind to enact greater agency. There is cost to using the weapons of transformation. The game doesn't romanticize the power, it makes you pay for it. The combat sits uneasily with some players, which I can understand. It is sometimes compared to Souls-like pacing, but honestly, it's not about mastery so much as resourceful vulnerability. You fight with pipes, knives, a naginata, weapons degrade. The enemy's designs push you to avoid open fights. The feeling of vulnerability is the point. The fewer resources you have, the more the town's pressure is felt in your palms. You're not empowered, you're surviving with what you can. But the combat is also narration. The physical fights are metaphors for the psychic fights Hinako wages. Fighting a clustered kitchen knife woman is a fight with the enforced domesticity she represents. That cohesion, mechanics mirroring narrative, is what saves F from being decorative. And the rituals, the 3 rites Hinako is forced to undergo in the shrine that stitch on the fox have, brand her back, and mark her face, those sequences are violent and beautiful and deliberately ambiguous. Who is committing them? Are they supernatural consecrations? Or are they memory sequences of the clan's training? Either reading is valid. The game asks you to live with the uncertainty. What makes the game's fear stick is the refusal to vest evil in a single object or person. The antagonist is not a demon in a cave. The antagonist is a culture that refuses to allow death to be anything but productive. The town turns mourning into profit, grief into ritual, and ritual into governance. That's the cruelty. That's the bloom. Silent Hill F is purposely plural at its close. There are 5 main endings: Coming Home to Roost, Fox's Wedding, The Fox Wets Its Tail, Ebisugaoka in Silence, and the tonal outlier, The Great Space Invasion UFO. They're not merely good-bad binaries, they are thought experiments. Each ending rewrites agency, culpability, and the town's future in a different key. Coming Home to Roost is the game's default, a brutal reading. Hinako is revealed to have been taking pills that destabilize her. The wedding massacre is real. The monster is, in part, pharmacological. This ending reads as a horror of manipulation and structural failure. A girl, drugged into psychosis by the very people who promised to protect her, becomes the instrument of violence. The scene where her face is found in a wedding dress, a peeled shell, is a kind of tragic archetype. The person someone else wanted her to be, destroyed and exposed. Fox's Wedding reflects the horror into betrayal. Here, Shu, the friend you trust, is the supply line of the pills. This ending is narratively corrosive because it repositions caring into predation. It suggests that horror is not only an external force but intimate sabotage. Someone close who believes they are doing the right thing for a girl they think they protect by removing her choices. It implicates friendship, which is what makes the betrayal sting so sharp. The Fox Wets Its Tail leans towards reconciliation, if you can call it that. With the sacred sword used, Kotiyuki shows traces of a human epistemology, someone who grew into groomed mythology and then glimpsed it as a choice. It's the ending where the gods step back, where 2 halves of the town's history, Tsukumogami and Inari, shift in the scale without decisive dominance. It's ambiguous but less catastrophic. Ebisugaoka in Silence is the true ending, only in the sense that it attempts a narrative closure that refuses divine interference. Cleanse the sword, reconcile the bruise, reject the ritual. This ending erases supernatural actors and asks the story to resolve as human political action. It's calm but quiet. It's not escape, it's a tenacious truce. The town is still wounded. The people are still marked. But there's less cosmic puppetry and more choice. For many readers or players, this feels like the best ending, because it centers human clarity. But even here, the cost of clarity is high. The town itself may be evacuated, the land poisoned, and the future uncertain. And The Great Space Invasion is a wry, almost cathartic note. It's the classic Silent Hill Easter egg ending that winks aliens, kids, and a breath of surreal levity. It undercuts the weight of the other conclusions and exists to remind players and creators that genre seriousness can also laugh. Why all these endings? Because F is arguing that there's no single truth to trauma. There's politics, mythology, chemistry, and personal choice. To give you one resolution would be to lie. To ask for many is to grant the tragedy its proper multiplicity. One final observation about the endings I'd like to make is that None of them grants Hinako a cinematic victory where she walks out whole. She is not saved the way narratives expect. That is purposeful. The game's claim is radical in a low domestic way. Sometimes survival is transformation rather than return. The cost of surviving systems designed to erase you is often between incredible and impossible. There's a temptation to rank Silent Hill F against its predecessors and decide if it measures up. It does, and it doesn't, depending on what you expect. If you came for the narrow mechanics of a classic Silent Hill nostalgia trip, you may feel the increased combat and the layered myth-making shift the tone. If you came for a new iteration that interrogates gender and inheritance in a Japanese setting with ferocity and complexity, F is one of the most interesting things the series has done in decades. What sticks with me long after the credits play isn't any single set piece or twist. It's the insistence on ambiguity. Silent Hill F trusts its audience with nuance. It asks you to hold contradictory truths. Gods and patriarchy can both be real. Trauma can be both pharmacological and ritualistic. Love can be caring and controlling. The town doesn't explain itself in full. It offers fragments and asks you to build meaning from the ruins. Of course, there are things F could have done better. Side characters sometimes read like archetypes rather than full people. Some plot beats trade complexity for efficiency. And yes, the male gaze of some narrative choices is noticeable. There are moments when I wish more women had been in the writer's chair offering different textures to the story of a woman's survival. But those critiques don't erase the game's ambition. If anything, they underline it. The story is trying to do something large and messy and inevitably imperfect. The best horror, to put it bluntly, doesn't need to terrify you outright. It needs to stay with you in small, strange ways. Silent Hill F does that by turning familiar things, weddings, family dinners, and neighborhood shrines into objects worthy of suspicion. It makes the ordinary uncanny and then asks whether the ordinary was ever ordinary at all. Hinako's story ends on a tangle of petals and promises. The town may be quieter, the gods may sleep or step back, but the underlying pattern remains: repetition, ritual, and the human machinery that keeps tradition spinning even when they hurt. Silent Hill F doesn't hand you a lesson so much as a memory, that when you make pain sacred, you give it away to survive. There's no tidy consolation, and that's the point. The bloom of memory is not a single moment, it's a season. It returns, it seduces, it kills in petals, but sometimes through the weeds, something new takes root. Not necessarily better, not necessarily freer, but honest.